This week, the tables are turning where I am being interviewed by one of my best friends, Brendan St. Brown. You can find him on Instagram, Brendan St. Brown 300. The reason that we're doing the episode this way is because so far I've been asking other people questions to learn about them. I think as a host, it's important that whoever is watching this can learn a little bit about my story. The whole purpose of Commonly Vulnerable is to make vulnerability more common. So I opened up about a lot of different things within my personal life that I haven't been too public about in the past. So really excited to kind of share this with people and hopefully inspire other people to open up and not be afraid to just share some of the hardest points of your life, because those are the moments that actually matter and actually mold and really transformed my life. So without further ado, check out this episode of CV.
So man, let's just start off with how you doing? And I just want to preface real quick. You have a rule when someone asks you how you doing, you refuse to say a single word, good, bad, fine. So how you doing? How's the mental? How's the soul? How's everything?
I think I'm in a really good spot. Really. I had taken notice of a couple things in my life recently that I wasn't too proud of, but I wasn't beating myself up about it or anything. And that was really, I felt like since probably the last 4 months, I haven't had a single weekend that was truly just for me. And I don't even need the whole weekend, but I really mean just a day. And I was getting very frustrated because there are certain goals, ambitions, and passions that I have that I haven't been able to explore the last while. And one of them that you know about is the free diving, the scuba diving. And living here in Miami, it's one of the best spots ever for that. So I noticed that I had nothing really booked on this weekend. And usually what my habit is I fill that with work. I fill that with meetings. I fill that with shoots. I fill that with something. And I said, no, I'm putting my foot down and I am booking scuba diving for this week in a refresher course. But it was really fascinating to me when I went through that whole process, because I learned something and I took note of something about myself. And that's, I stared at that checkout page for minutes before I pulled the trigger. It was $350 to go scuba diving and get the refresher course done. And if that $350 was directly attached to my business, I'd book it instantly. If that was a flight to get to an event, I'd book it right there. I would have no hesitation. But as soon as I booked something that only involved me, I hesitated. And it was I actually had to force myself. I had to text Deepak about it and not ask for permission because I was putting on the company card. I'll be filming it, making some content, therefore it's a business write-off. But basically I was I don't know why I find it so challenging to book things that are just for me. And I think that's one of the traps that business owners can fall into. And I'm glad that I caught myself, because now I'm occupying not just Sunday, which was the scuba diving day, but Saturday with free diving as well, so that I can really take a full weekend and just dedicate it to passions. And I know that the manifestations of the work that I do this weekend within those two things are going to turn into something beautiful for the rest of my life, for the week, with more clarity and focus, better work, just an elevated mood, more inspiration heading into the week. And I think that's really important and understated. I've struggled with that a little bit recently.
Yeah, man. And going back, we're always working, and I really admire your work ethic. You took the day off, first time in months, and you realize that you need to create more space for yourself, more time for yourself. And so you're seeking out doing that through scuba diving. Now here in Miami, you can do anything in Miami. Everything's here. Why did you choose scuba diving for recreation? Is there a reason? Is there something that pulls you to scuba diving?
Yeah, so I got my scuba diving license in 2018 on the island of Koh Tao in Thailand. And this is actually the most popular destination in the world to get your open water certification in. Several reasons. One, it's one of the most affordable. So it was $300 and you did that for 3 days straight. And they have some great dive sites. But I do believe that ever since I was a young child, I've had a calling to the ocean. I've had a calling to marine life. And I've had a calling to doing things that better the animals in our world. It's not an accident that my all-time hero is Steve Irwin. And I cried like a baby when he died on my 10th birthday. And I really do feel like it's not an accident that I live in Miami and now I have the opportunity to explore marine life in such a phenomenal ecosystem. I did not grow up next to marine life. I grew up in a river city. So we had snapping turtles and garter snakes, and the wildlife was interesting, but it's a completely different level once you get into the Caribbean area where you've got these incredible reef systems. You've got sea turtles, several species of sea turtles. You've got invasive lionfish, which suck. You've got all these different species of shark, which right here in Miami, we have bull sharks, lemon sharks, tiger sharks, and nurse sharks. We've got all these different species of sharks. I saw a spotted eagle ray yesterday. And I think that my calling to the ocean as well as my calling to a camera are meant to be aligned together. And I couldn't be more well positioned to put those two things in practice in the city. And that's really why scuba diving was the thing that I felt like I needed to do this weekend.
I love that. And right off the bat, one of the first things that I picked up as you're sharing this is the passion in your voice and the excitement. Now, I don't share the same calling to the water as you do. So I think I can speak for myself and other people. What are we missing in the water? What does the water present that I'm missing here on land?
A lot of people have thalassophobia, which is where you look into the open water, perhaps a deep sea or deep lake, and you're absolutely terrified of the blackness, the pit that is this body of water that's below you. I get the exact opposite. I probably have thalassophilia, where I see that and I get genuinely excited and even more peaceful. So when I enter the water, every single time I've done that, you can't do well in the water while you're anxious. You have to be calm. If you are swimming with wildlife and animals and marine life, you can't be splashing around everywhere and explosive. You actually have to lower your heart rate. When you go underwater, the longer you want to hold your breath is very dependent on how calm you are. And so it's very meditative for me. It's also one of those things where there's only a handful of activities that I've done in my life that I find it so easy to enter flow state. And my definition of flow state is there is no thought that is possible of penetrating my activity right now. So I am in there and it is impossible for me to be distracted. If I'm under the water, I can't check my phone. If I'm under the water, there's no emails that I'm going. I'm not getting phone calls. I'm not scrolling through TikTok. I'm not getting lost in the sauce. And to me, that's something that I think a lot of people are missing out of their lives. And simply just going beneath the surface allows you to literally quiet your world. And you can't speak. So that means you're only left with your thoughts. And I find that really beautiful.
Wow. I think that's so powerful, really getting in the water in a time to just collect your thoughts. And I think there's something to it being grounded with Mother Earth, with nature, with Pachamama. Now, when I see you and when I think of Jamey Lee, there's many things that come to mind. One of them was sea life. And I think something that is able to connect the two in alignment is sea life and travel. Now, you have a saying about traveling versus vacation and something along the lines of that. So for people who are not familiar with that, can you share this Jamey Gems?
Most people vacation to escape, but I decide to travel to discover. That's a Jamey original quote that I'll take, and I really believe in that because a lot of people believe that travel is going to Cancun or to Punta Cana and staying at an all-inclusive resort and just getting obliterated for an entire week with their friends. And to me, that's like such a gross version of travel. Like it's not even travel at all. It's literally just a bunch of people that go to do exactly what they're capable of doing, whatever city or town they're in, except on a beach in the tropics. and usually with like even less inhibitions. I don't respect that kind of travel if your goal is to explore the world, which mine is. For me, every time that I've gone out, especially by myself, to a new country where I don't speak the language, I don't practice the religion, I don't look like the people around me, I learn so much about life. And what keeps circling back is a couple lessons. One of the most important lessons I ever learned in my life was how to be alone and not lonely. And I learned that when I was 21 through solo travel. Another lesson I learned is just how similar human beings actually are, despite our complexion, despite our race, despite our religious beliefs, despite our political affiliations, and despite our neighbors. We really are all looking for love, for some form of passion, for some form of purpose, for some form of humor, and for some form of connection. And that is the universal language of humanity. And I've been able to experience that with people that I can't communicate with because we don't share the same tongue. That to me is like why travel is such a teacher and why I go out to discover, not to escape.
Wow, man, it's so powerful. Now, you brought up something about you're communicating with people who share a different tongue, who speak a different language. You're a white guy from Canada. Do you ever get frightened or scared traveling through these countries?
It's not really happened just out and about, but I have been in a couple situations that I was genuinely terrified. And I'll tell you a couple of them. So one of them was in 2018, I went to Indonesia and I spent almost a month in the island of Bali. And my original plan was to spend maybe a week to 2 weeks in Bali, then head to the island of Lombok next door, as well as to explore the Komodo Islands where I could film and photograph Komodo dragons. That was the plan. The plan did not occur because on day 2 of my arrival, while I was in Bali, I was in a co-working space. And it was this big dome in Ubud. And I'm in there and I'm working and I'm getting a lot of stuff done. I was actually working on the short film that I showed you today of Shargao. I was editing that. So I'm in there and all of a sudden, the entire building just violently shakes, unlike anything I've experienced in my entire life. And it just, imagine feeling like you're surfing a wave that just moves like this, but on land. It made no sense. And I hear people screaming on the outside of the streets. I hear honking and everything. And I was locked in this co-working space. I'm the only one in there. So I run out and I open the door to exit. And I'm like, oh my God, I just opened into an office. And I did it again. And I opened the next door thinking it's the exit and it was an office. And the third time it happened again and it was the wrong way. I didn't pay attention to my surroundings enough so that when an emergency happened, I couldn't leave right away. And eventually I did find the exit. And I saw a pool just splashing and all the water was being removed. And it was my first time ever experiencing a natural disaster. And it was a 7.0 earthquake that struck. And for context, a 7.0 earthquake was the equivalent of the one that decimated Haiti in 2009. And the epicenter of the earthquake was on the island I was supposed to head to next in Lombok. And I woke up the next day and I believe 40 people had been killed. And I experienced all of the shakes, but none of the damage and the collateral. So a couple days go by and we had a few tremors that were sketchy. And then I'm out exploring again and another earthquake happens. And just violent shaking non-stop. And I was actually in Uluwatu in the south. And I woke up the next morning and 300 people had died. And 200,000 people were homeless. And it was kind of then where I realized that you can't plan for those sort of things to occur. And where I'm from, I don't live on a big fault line. We have minor earthquakes, but in Indonesia, you're literally on the ring of fire. So Lombok, the island I was supposed to head to next, was flattened. I already had an Airbnb lined up that I had to obviously cancel. Komodo had to be canceled because I was too scared of being on the water during a tsunami risk. And even at one point, there was a volcano risk on the island of Bali where they were thinking that it's possible that the volcano can erupt with all this activity. And so I got to the point where I said, I need to get out of this country. It's been 3.5 weeks, and I need to go somewhere that I've never been before, that can also get me to Bangkok next week where I can fly home out of, and is cheap enough to fly to. So I was in a cafe, and I searched Denpasar, which is the main airport in Bali, and I put no destination. Leaving tomorrow, Google Flights, showed me everything. And I saw that I could go to Perth, Australia for $120, leaving in 15 hours. And I was like, when am I ever going to have the chance to go to Perth on a $120 budget? That makes no sense as a Canadian. And I was like, as long as I can get from Perth to Bangkok pretty cheap, I'll do it. And then I saw an AirAsia flight in 5 or 6 days, that was like $200. So I was like, I can get in and out of Australia for $320. I'm in. So then after that, I kind of pivoted the situation and left Indonesia and went to Australia on less than 16 hours notice. But all of those things really tie into, like, you just don't know what can occur during travel. And those are the moments where you have to really be mature and be an adult and look at the situation for what it is. You know, like, I could have complained that, oh, I can't go to Lombok, but you have to contextualize the situation at hand, that hundreds of people are dead and hundreds of thousands are homeless. And I remember just being very emotional during that time. That was very challenging. And that's one of the things that I think people don't talk about enough when you travel, is how emotionally draining and challenging it can be when you're gone for that long. And I was by myself. So I didn't have family that was even in the same continent as me. I mean, I think my nearest family members were over 10,000 miles away. So, like, just learning how to navigate that, all those stresses by yourself, I think is very maturing. And I did that at the age of 21. So yeah, it changed a lot of who I am today.
You've mentioned this before about being alone but not being lonely. Can you just give me more clarity on that? What does that mean?
The most important thing in life is how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself. I got that from Tom Bilyeu a few years ago. And what that means is that when you turn your lights off at night and you go to bed and no one's next to you and your phone's in a different room, where does your mind go? When the lights are off and there's no distractions, the only thing that you're left with is your own mind. Do you own it or does it own you? And I think a lot of people, especially now that we have social media, it's so easy to distract yourself with a FaceTime, with a text, or with a DM, or with just the scroll, where you just hit the scroll all night long and it feels like you're being social, but you're not. And it feels like you're living a life, but no, you're actually vicariously living through someone else. And what I found was such an amazing professor for me was travel. Because I went out and I didn't have access to my family. I didn't have access to anyone. I was geographically removed from every single person I'd ever met in my entire life. And I had absolutely nothing on earth to do other than remind myself of how far I came that led to this moment, enjoy the present, because this incredible waterfall that's in front of me, I will remember for the rest of my life. And that's why I'm bringing it up now. And then think about the future, because how on earth can I possibly replicate those memories and moments to happen more frequently? And I just distinctly remember truly enjoying and loving my own company by the end of that trip, where I can still to this day say that my all-time best friend is me. And I don't think most people have done enough work to really say the same.
Wow, that's beautiful and that's powerful. And as I listen to you, one thing that I'm just amazed by, and I call it before your idea, Fawcett, how you're able to just give these novel explanations on the spot. Where does that come from?
I think my ability to orate was something that I was born with, and I think it does come from my father. So my dad always taught me that if you can communicate to a room, you will always have an ability to have whatever kind of job you want for the rest of your life. He always told me about how he was able to have any amount of the successes that he had in his life solely because he knew how to navigate people and he knew how to be a public speaker. And he always said that he loved public speaking growing up. And when I was in high school, I would just love every time I had the chance to speak. If we had a presentation, I would nail it every single time. And the time where I was tested with that the most was in 2016 when my best friend passed away. And I was presented with the opportunity to do a eulogy. And I remember throughout my entire life, I refused to use cue cards. Even down where in grade 10, we had a presentation for one of my classes. Shout out to Miss Vanessa. And this was for civics and careers in Canada. And she told us, she's like, I am marking you on your cue cards for your presentation. It's a part of it. And I went up to her after class and I was like, hey, miss, like, I can't use cue cards. Like, they throw me off. Like, I know what I want to say. I know my couple points and I go and I let my words come to me. So it's very natural. She says, Jamey, it doesn't matter. You're going to use cue cards. And so I kind of took the L and I use cue cards. So I go up and I'm kind of have my cue cards like this. And I'm reading them, looking up and down the way that I was always taught. You know, you quickly glance, you look up, and then you continue moving, then flip them over, move on to the next. And by the end of that presentation, she said, wow, that was really well done. I'm happy you came around in the cue cards. And I handed them in completely blank. So I've always been like that. But the reason that I use that story to lead into the next is because I remember the second time somebody said, you need cue cards, was when the priest said to me, you need cue cards for a eulogy. And I was like actually starting to freak out because I felt so much more confident, like freeballing the whole speech than I did like having cue cards. It really messes me up knowing that I have to like remember all these different things and structures and that sort of stuff. I'd rather speak from my soul. And so I started like writing out a speech and it was like actually freaking me out. And then eventually what I did is I said, screw this, and I deleted the entire document. And I kind of threw it out and I went to my friend Julia's house and kind of worked on how I wanted to structure my eulogy. And I took one tiny cue card and I just wrote 4 bullet points. And that was the only thing that I had on that cue card. And it was just the 4 things that I needed to say in what order. So I went out, and during the time that was probably the most difficult speech of my life to give was eulogizing my best friend when we were 19 years old. And I remember looking out into the crowd, and if I saw people crying, I would then just ad-lib a joke. And that just to like raise the mood, and then everybody would start laughing. Then I'd be like, okay, well, now I want you to be sad again. And then I would just like tell a very deep, intimate story that would make people cry. But I always kept to my 4 points, which are my 4 main messages. And at the end of that eulogy, I was presented with an opportunity to then do more public speaking. Thanks to Melanie Adams, when she was the former CEO of the Queensway Carleton Hospital Foundation, which was set to raise $5 million to renovate the mental health ward that my friend stayed at before. And so that eulogy led me to multiple other speaking opportunities, which led to kind of my first dipping of my toes in philanthropy. But I don't know where it comes from. It comes from my dad for sure, but I think I've just been lucky where words have come easy to me.
You touched a little bit about your friend, and I know the story, and I think one thing that is very admirable and beautiful is you carry a piece of him. Can you share that story?
So when my best friend died, I made a few commitments to myself. And one of them was I recognized that his life had been cut short. And I still to this day wish that he was here. And I remember saying to myself that if I truly believe that there's always going to be a piece of CJ with me, then I owe it to him to bring him on the best adventures and have the best life and exist in the best memories possible. And so I literally have him right here on my wrist, and this hasn't left my wrist since 2016. So we're coming up on 7 years now where this has been parked. And it was a big inspiration for me to pick up a camera and go travel. I've taken him to Thailand, to Peru, to Portugal, to the Philippines, to Morocco, to Croatia, to the United States, to Miami, to the west coast of Canada, and as many places in between. And I also recognize that because he passed away through suicide, I didn't want to ever be in the position where that was ever an option for me. And so I kind of became the architect of my own life to create something that was so fun, so exciting, and so awesome that it would be an impossibility for any negative situation to really overcome me. And so I carry with him everywhere I go with me. And it's one of my proudest things.
There's so many things that I admire about you. And one of the things that I want to highlight right here is your emotional strength. I've seen so many curveballs being thrown at you. And I think one thing, just because they wear it well doesn't mean it's not heavy on them. However, though, you are able to not only like carry what's going on with you, but you're able to run a whole business, take care of 20 other people. And one thing we talk a lot about is the masculine and feminine energy. Can you give a one-on-one on masculine and feminine energy? Like, give your overview for that.
I think when I'm in my masculine energy, I'm extremely like just direction focused. It's like a conqueror's mentality. It's a competitive edge. It's where it's like, I am going to accomplish this thing and absolutely nothing will get in my way. And I will beat people, not like physically beat them up, but I will beat them in competition on my way to get there. That's when I'm in my most masculine. But when I'm in my more feminine side, that's where I'm extraordinarily empathetic and compassionate. And I think as a business owner, it's so important to be well balanced in both, because life is nuanced. And both of those sides of yourself are really, really important to tap into. And it's something that like, I find myself, I often very much gravitate, depending on the day or depending on who I'm talking to one of those two energies. There are some people that may have only ever seen my feminine side, because to them, I just have a very compassionate, empathetic relationship. There are some people that may have only seen my masculine side, where they just see me in a very intense competitive state. But to me, I understand which situations I get to bring both out of. And that's probably the best way to describe how I use them in my life.
You talked about how you have masculine and you have feminine. I thought only men can be masculine and just women are feminine.
So we're opening up a whole other can of worms here. No, I think everybody can have masculine traits and everyone can have feminine traits. To me, masculine is just, it's not necessarily gendered. It just means that it's what traditionally how you would represent men as, which would be very intense and ambitious and direction focused and competitive, while neglecting probably some of the feminine traits, which would be compassion, love, tenderness, nourishment. So I think those two things, when they come together, really make a beautifully complete human.
And yeah, we're talking about balance. There's so many different things going on in life, and there's some things that I think one should balance, but I could be wrong, and someone could prioritize other things if they think this is what we should prioritize for balance. What do you prioritize for balance?
I've actually really sucked at balance as of late. And I think balance is one of those things that's extremely nuanced, because it depends on the person. And everyone has their own like unique ratios to like how much work they want to do, how much play they want to do, what does play look like, and does work look like. Sometimes they mix and mingle and they're the same thing. The way that I try to balance is by understanding what is it that Jamey actually loves the most. And that's a couple things. One, that's wildlife. Two, that's adventure. Three, I'd say mountain biking and hockey and like kind of those like sporty passions. Four is making wonderfully beautiful connections with incredible people. And five is business. I love all of those things. And I need to figure out a way to live and exist in harmony with all of those five desires while also never neglecting my health, wealth, happiness, and relationships and finances. So it's like kind of like this ongoing puzzle. And I had a client, Denise, she told me about this quote of her father's, and she said that running a business, and I would say this is just running a life, is like cooking with 11 pots, but you have 6 lids. And so you're constantly like moving the lids around and like, oh, this one's steaming. You're just putting that on. So it's like nothing's ever complete. To me, that's what balance is. It's like you do the best and juggle how you can. You prioritize things where they're necessary, but you never let anything fully drop to the floor.
Wow. And okay, so you brought up your qualities, right? Your pillars, your frameworks, your identity frameworks. You brought up something to me in the car that I thought was fascinating. You came with the idea of a Renaissance creator. Can you explain your motivation behind being of Renaissance?
Yeah, so a lot of people talk about like this term of like a Renaissance man, which is essentially just a man that is very well versed in multiple avenues. So it's somebody that can probably speak multiple languages while is also very romantic, while is also in great physical shape, while is also successful in his own ways, who also may be able to cook, but also probably has a few hobbies that are interesting, like rock climbing or skating or whatever that looks like. It's just a very diversified human with competency in many areas. And to me, a Renaissance creator is that, but as a content creator. So one of the things that I'm really working on is being that. So right now, I've really, really solid drone skills. I have really, really solid skills with both photo and video on land. I'm now learning how to do photo and video underwater. I'm familiar with action cameras versus DSLRs, but I need to learn how to use film cameras, how to use perhaps cinema cameras like a Red. I also need to learn how to use other kinds of drones, such as FPV drones. And so when you stack all of these different abilities with the tools, you become more of a Renaissance creator. But then the next step of that is in the editing. Well, I've gotten a lot of experience in the short form side and the vlog style of things, but I've also made a few short films. So next would be like building out an actual commercial of sorts or a legitimate film. And so what you do is you stack all of these different skill sets from the cameras that you use and the cinematography skills that you have and the edits that you can produce, and you put this all in this one package so anyone can give you any task and you can get the job done and it will still look great with a high level of competency. That's what a Renaissance creator is.
Talking about creator and influence, and you single-handedly are behind influencing, almost 500 million people. And with that, there's a responsibility, and I'm going to gear it in particular to the younger generation. What advice, you're big bro right now, what big bro advice are you going to tell to the younger generation?
About creating?
About life.
You never know when it can be cut short. I wish I could say that I don't think people realize the effect that mortality motivation can have on you. And at some point, you are going to be faced with death and with loss. And you are going to have the decision that when it hits close, like really close to home, what do you do in those moments? Because your options really are this. You could look at that situation and it makes you worse. It makes you worse because you can't get over the loss. You can't move past it. You don't know how to deal with grief, and you just aren't equipped with the tools to evolve. Or you can go the direction where it makes you better. And you look at the person who you loved that was in your life and is now not, and you say, I am going to live out the rest of my life with you in my memory. And I'm going to make you proud, and I'm also going to make myself proud by carrying on your legacy. And I think that's a really powerful thing. I don't think people talk about mortality and motivation enough, and that's exactly what I would tell my younger self, because I do think my younger self actually did follow that advice. So just be a bit reassuring for him to hear.
What are you most proud of that you've done for yourself?
If I'm being genuinely honest, and I keep alluding to this on this conversation, but I am most proud of how I handled the loss of my closest friend. That was fucking hard, really fucking hard to go through. And I replayed the events of that night 1,000 times. I saw everyone's reactions to getting that news broke. And I remember being there for friends, and that was my healing. I found like I healed by being a healer. And that was such a beautiful lesson to learn at such a young age. And I'm fucking proud of how I handled that entire thing and how I still carry his name on me. Because I think the hardest moments of your life are going to provide you with the biggest of challenges, and those are also the biggest of tests. And I really think I passed that with flying colors.
Thank you for sharing, brother. Now I want to go back to some Jamey verbs about healing. Can you give us a 101 overview of healing and traumas and the mental and the soul? And
where do you want me to direct this to?
Let's talk about healing traumas. I come to you and I want more insight on healing traumas.
So the first thing I'll say is I'm not a professional at all. I'm not a psychologist. I'm just a guy that I feel like I've done a good job at managing my own traumas. And so that's the preface. So what I will say is how I was able to navigate it and how I think I would do it again. And so the first thing is that the moment that trauma happens, acknowledge that you're in a traumatic situation. I distinctly remember just being you are going to remember exactly everything about this day for the rest of your life, and it's going to be in extremely vivid detail, and you're probably going to replay this. I remember that active thought. And so that awareness just kind of allowed me to just really pick apart the situation and calm myself down later, because I knew that even subconsciously some of those events and those things from that night would reappear. So the first thing is kind of just acknowledging that you're in the situation as it occurs, which then I find allows you to kind of just take a little step back. At least that's what it did for me. The next thing that I did that I think is really, really important when I was dealing with trauma was never allow yourself to bottle anything up. So if I ever felt like that stuff was bothering me, the 5 closest people in my circle would know. And I would call them, I would text them, I would FaceTime them, be hey, straight up, I am not having a good time right now. I am not okay. And we would come together. And every time that I went out of my way to let people know that I was not okay, people came to the rescue. And not necessarily to say that I needed saving, but having that accompaniment and extra companions to be with you on that journey was really, really profound and powerful for me. Knowing that I have people that are actual ride or dies, it allows you to navigate that situation so much more fluidly. So that's the next thing. And then the third one I would say is heal through healing others. And that's not to neglect yourself, but that's step up where you can to be there for other people when they really need it. And they'll remember that. And I truly believe in karma. So I've always tried to be there for everyone else.
You brought up something about like saying you're not okay, straight up. And I have a difficult time letting people know that I'm not okay. And there's been multiple times you're the first person I come to when I'm dealing with stress. And there's been times where you ask me, hey, how's it going? I say, I'm good. And then in my brain, I'm calculating, like, how do I transition? Why for someone like me and other men, why is it so hard for us to open up?
Because it's a sign of weakness. I think a lot of men think that they have to be stoic. And you do have to be stoic, but stoics don't ignore emotions. They acknowledge them and they navigate through them. I think a lot of men aren't raised with the right tools to navigate through feelings and through emotions, so that when you have intense levels of stress in something that could be a relationship, instead of just like not telling other people about it, you kind of sit and acknowledge that you're in this tough situation. And I think everybody should have their own advisory board. And that's tough to create. You have to be a trustworthy person yourself to then have a trustworthy cabinet of advisors. And I think it's just people never want to admit that they are feeling any type of way because their ego is in front of them. It's very difficult to remove the ego and say like, hey, like I actually do need support today and right now, than it is to just say, no, I'm good and I can just push through it. Too many men bottle everything up until it implodes. And that's really sad. And I've seen that happen too many times. And I think it's, now that I analyze it, it's several reasons. One is a lot of men feel like the people that are in their lives don't care about their problems. So they don't even bother telling them about it. They carry the assumption that their family and their friends would either be burdened by what's on their mind or just wouldn't care at all in the first place. To that, I say, fuck no. That is not true. There is always people in your life that genuinely care to listen to you. And you need to understand that, and you need to have the courage to open up to them, because they are going to have no understanding of knowing what's going on between your ears until you tell them. I also think there's another part that is cultural. I think when you are kind of raised in this like superhero, Marvel, like superpower type scenario, and where you only ever live in a society where you can see the outcome of somebody's success, you never see the moments in between of which they really, really struggled. You never see other people other than yourself go through the dirt and have to solve the problem. And so we just put other people on this like pedestal, and we always assume that they just have like a better brain than I do so they can handle this thing. Oh, they have a different life than I do, so they didn't have to deal with this sort of shit that I do. So like that's them. So it's like understanding that everyone in the world is so fucking different than you, but also is probably going through the exact same thing. And just being a bit more humble there, I think is really, really important. And I also think the third option there is I don't think most men are good at creating the space for other men to open up. I think a lot of men put others down when they get a little bit vulnerable, and I think that's gross. I think a lot of men genuinely like don't know how to respond to people in a mature fashion when they open up about truly powerful things that they're dealing with. And I think when you put all those three things together, you get just a society of men that don't do anything to benefit themselves mentally when they're going through those challenges. And I empathize deeply because it's hard. It's hard to create your own cabinet of advisors that are truly trustworthy friends and people that you can rely on and that are mature and that are communicative and all those things. It's rare to be emotionally mature today. And yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I agree with you where it's hard and not as common when you see men create the space for other men to open up. And a lot of the times, I think we seek that out in friendships with females. And I know you have a really good friendship with one of your friends who is a girl. She's recently engaged. I think it's so cool. You're going to be the homie of honor. Like, tell me about that friendship. How did you meet her? And tell us about the homie of honor.
I'm so happy you brought this up. So Julia, shout out to you. So Julia is one of my all-time best friends. And I'm so grateful for who she is and how she's evolved as a woman. And we met long time ago. So we actually went to elementary school and high school together, but she was a grade above me. So we always knew each other, but like weren't that close. And then in 2015, I got a job at a trampoline park. She was already working there. Her and I were the 2 brand new hires and like instantly hit it off. And so we would like make playlists and like, it was always Matchbox 20 and like Rob Thomas and like a bunch of classics. And it was so cool. Kind of just like building like a genuine friendship. I remember when she had her first date with her now fiance, soon to be husband, Charles. And she like came up to me and she was like, I have a date tonight. And I was like, oh shit, who's it? Who's the man? And she's like, he's fine. And I'm like, okay, tell me. And she like told me all about like how she was feeling, where they were going. And then she gave me the synopsis the next day. She was like, absolute gentleman. Like, she's like, he opened the door for me. He like pulled out my chair, took my jacket, like did all the gentlemanly steps. And he still does that today. And so I remember witnessing the very beginning of their relationship. And we just became really close through 2015 and 16, working together like 4 or 5 days a week. And in 2016, going back to it, but when my friend died, she was like the most supportive person out of everyone. She was the person that would pick me up from my house. She was one of the few people, and I had a few amazing friends that showed up right at my door the day that it happened. She was one of the first people I called because she knew the situation that I was in before I got the news that he had passed, and she wanted like the updates. And she led with so much empathy and compassion during the time that I needed it most, that I will forever feel indebted to that generosity. And so whenever she has anything in her life that she needs to vent, I will be there for her. Whenever she needs a homie of honor that will stand up there on the bride's side and fucking cheer it on, I'm there. Because I'm so lucky that I have this remarkably beautiful platonic friendship with another woman. And it's one of the most amazing things in my life, truly. I can't say enough good things about that whole dynamic. I can't say enough good things about her. And I can't say enough about how fucking amped I am for her wedding this summer. And to be able to have a speech there and to be the MC of the wedding and to see something that I saw blossom from literally day one into marriage is so awesome and cool. Like, literally one of the coolest things in my life was I was able to see a relationship go from day 0 to everything else. Like, what a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I used to hold this view pretty strongly that it's very rare where men and women can hold platonic friendships. Now I don't hold that view as strongly.
Was that because I changed your view on it?
I think with maturity, as I grew.
Okay.
Now, my question for you is, why should men create the space for more platonic friendships with females rather than seeing an attractive woman and be like, oh, like I'm going to go after her?
You need to understand that I think women might just be the better half of humanity. They're the ones that when you are having the roughest day and you are sick, you are beaten, there's nothing better than just having a woman present. She doesn't even need to say anything. She just needs to be there. And it's like, you can like feel the nourishment and the energy that is there. That's such a beautiful, beautiful thing. So many women I know are so compassionate and so empathetic. And I think that's a quality that so few men possess, that even just allowing more of that to come into your life will make you a more self-aware individual. And I also think it's so important to have platonic opposite sex relationships, because it's just a sign of genuine maturity. If you can't have a platonic friendship as a guy with another woman, what does that say about your character? That means that you only view women as objects. You only view them as sexual creatures and potential mates. That's crazy to me. How the fuck does that make sense? I am so thankful for the women in my life that I have that are completely platonic relationships, because they open my eyes to how men behave, how other women behave amongst each other. I'm a better and smarter man because of it. They're the people that I can go to more often than not with some of the things that I'm experiencing, that I know, like, some of my boys may not know the best way to put it into words, but the girls always do. It's such a beautiful thing to be a man with platonic friends that are women that are just on your side and have your back. And also, little tip for the dudes, when you have those kinds of relationships, they're happy to make intros for you because you're a genuinely good person. So never forget that your reputation always follows you. Like, I've always hated the thing about, like, oh, men and women can't be friends. That's such bullshit. That's so false.
Amazing.
That was a good clip.
Yeah, that was a good clip. There was one more. Okay, no, I don't. I want to wrap this up because I think we got a lot of gems. What does the ideal Jamey Lee look like in 10 years? Describe the characteristics, where he is, what he's doing, his mindset, his habits. Describe the ideal. If it's build a character, in 10 years, who's the character? What's he looking like?
10 years from now, Jamey is living around the world wherever he pleases. He has properties in different countries. He's got a beautiful woman by his side, and they're already in discussions of what family is going to look like 10 years from now. And they're probably traveling the world together, exploring volcanoes, summiting Kilimanjaro, planting corals in Tahiti, and doing what they can to benefit wildlife and ecotourism around the world. Because I know that's my mission, and I couldn't think of anything more beautiful than having my partner be along that mission with me. So that's what I see. I see somebody that's in really fantastic shape, that is genuinely happy and smiling everywhere he goes. I see him in a financial position where whoever he wants to see at any moment, he can make that work by flying them to him or him flying to them. I see myself with a lot of vigor and passion in my eyes because I'm doing my ikigai. I'm exploring the world below and above the surface and documenting the creatures that live in it and sharing their stories, while also meeting wonderful humans along the way and sharing theirs too.
Well said, man. I think that's a wrap. Jamey Lee Amasito, my brother.
Thank you. If you enjoyed this episode, thank you so much for watching. Really means a lot to me. Go follow Brendan St. Brown 300. You can check me out on Instagram at JamesLife, Lifee. Would mean the world to me to have any support on social media, or you can follow on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube. Would honestly mean the world. So, thank you once again, and I will see you next week.